My name is Franklin Kalk. I'm 60 years old. I live in Austin, Texas. I took warfarin for 6 months about 3 years ago. I had a blood clot, probably due to heavy travel. There were no other complicating symptoms, or at least that was what we surmised at the time.
Now, when you say you had a blood clot, that, to anyone who hasn't had a blood clot before, that sounds kind of serious. Is that serious?
It is, and it was kind of an interesting, I'll tell you the long version, right? It started out, in retrospect, probably for several months. I had some developing issues, but didn't really know it at the time. But looking back after I discovered it, it became pretty clear that I had, it had these symptoms.
And just so we know, what are those symptoms?
Well, I was getting a little bit lightheaded occasionally. I just thought it was from working out too much or something like that, right? I travel a lot. My ankles had started to swell on long trips on aircraft, which they had never done before. And I just thought, well, it's inactivity. Well, of course it was, but it was also that I was having some of these other things, beginning to crop up in my veins or arteries, whatever. Anyway, the story is my wife and son were in Colorado on vacation. I was going to meet them. I flew to Denver from Austin. I was walking down the concourse in the Denver airport, talking to my wife on the phone, going to my next gate because I was flying to Vail. And all of a sudden, I felt like I was just walking through molasses. It was amazing. I just felt like I was in slow motion. And it wasn't even vertigo. It was, but I kind of thought it was. Okay, altitude, yada, yada, right? So I said to my wife, I have to sit down. I think I'm just, the thin air is getting to me in Denver. So I went over to my gate, kind of stumbled over, I guess, and I sat down and I put my head between my legs, and that didn't help, and I just crashed on the floor.
Wow.
So, then I felt kind of woozy, but I was, people were worried about me. I got up, I was able to get on the plane, and then over the next couple of days I felt fine. So no big deal. I was there for a week. I then flew to Germany. And I got to Germany, I felt fine. My first night there, I went into an establishment with a friend of mine to watch some soccer. We had a couple of beers. Walking out, we hit the cobblestone streets, and I twisted my ankle a little bit. The next day, in that same leg, I had a very tender spot on the back of my calf. And I thought, well, I must have twisted more than just my ankle. No big deal. But it felt really tender and tight, like I had pulled a muscle for a couple of days. And then over time, it kind of went away. So then a few days later, I flew back to Austin, got home. The next day, I had the same pain, but it was in my groin. And it was late at night, and I said to my wife, that's weird. It's moved. Maybe I have a blood clot. I'll go to the urgent care clinic in the morning. So the next morning, I got up, and it was big, and it was really tender and red. So I went in, and the doctor took one look and said, yeah, you have a blood clot. Get across the street to the radiology group, and we'll do an ultrasound. So I went across the street, had an ultrasound. It was pretty clear during the ultrasound procedure. It was kind of neat because, they make you do things like flex your ankles. And on aircraft, you may have noticed there are instructions in aircraft magazines about moving your legs, moving your knees up and down or flexing your ankles. And they had a speaker on the ultrasound device, so I could actually hear the blood flowing through my veins as I flexed my ankles. So those exercises are there for a reason, I guess, which I didn't know at the time. So I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. So the radiologist said, it'll take me a while to look at your chart. Go ahead and go home. I'll call you. So I got 5 minutes away, literally, from the clinic in my car, and the nurse called and said, come back. So I turned around, came back, and they gave me a heparin shot immediately in my belly. And
what's heparin for?
Heparin is a very fast-acting clot, basically, I'll call it clot breaker. I don't know exactly the terminology, but it dissolves the clot, and it's rapid. I mean, it only took a couple of days before the swelling had virtually gone away. And I took that for 10 days. I had to take shots in my belly, which was really, really uncomfortable. And then I started on warfarin after that. So 10 days on heparin, then I had a sort of a ramp up into warfarin regime and took warfarin for 6 months.
Now, I guess in your case in particular, it seems rather even scary to some people that some of those symptoms were even kind of not benign, but definitely synonymous with other kinds of causes.
Right.
And so your realization, that it was a blood clot seemed rather important to getting it treated in time before something worse happened.
Right. Well, I didn't really know anything about blood clots. I have to say, I wasn't educated about them at all. I'm a little better educated now, of course, but at the time I really didn't know anything. Once the pain moved from my calf to my groin, I kind of figured out, oh, wait a minute, this isn't just a muscle pull. Mm-hmm. And it's really tender. I mean, I couldn't touch it without it being pretty painful. So,
Wow.
That was a little bit, muscle pulls don't really feel that way. Well, muscle pull, if you really massage, maybe, okay. But I mean, just, light touch, I could feel it. So it was something different.
After you had the heparin treatment and you were able to sort of bust up the initial clot,
right?
And the warfarin was prescribed to essentially prevent clots from forming
Correct.
for a period of time in the future.
Right.
Now, is this a pill that you had to take every day? Well, first off, is it a pill, and is
It's
it
a
something
pill.
you had to take every day?
Right, it's a pill. You take it every day, I'm trying to remember. I can't remember exactly whether I actually took more than one in a day to ramp up to some level or not. I don't remember, but it took about 2 weeks to determine that I was stable on it, that my clotting factors were at a normal level and not varying a lot, because that's one of the things they look for. So I had to get blood tests every twice a week for 2 weeks, and then every week after that. But it's a pill, and long term, over 6 months, I took it once a day.
And so obviously, I guess the concern is, since the warfarin itself modulates the clotting factors and how
Right.
effective and efficient they work for you, that too much warfarin could be a bad thing then.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So when your doctor prescribed this for you, what were the considerations that went into, did he have lots of special instructions for you? Did he try to get a lot of information from you? Did you have to modify anything in your life to
Right. accommodate
the dosing?
Yes, all of the above. He gave me some they weren't super detailed, but fairly detailed instructions. Once I discovered and had verified at the doctor that I had a clot, and that I was, because these shots will remind you if nothing else. Because compared to the shots, the warfarin itself was not really a big deal for me in terms of the ingestion.
Sure.
The shots hurt. They hurt for quite a while after taking, maybe 20 minutes. I would have to lie down and just try to relax because I had such a massive pain right in my belly where I got the shot. Anyway, the warfarin was, so there were relatively detailed instructions. I had educated myself after finding about the clot. And so the doctor, more or less cursorily went over the instructions with me rather than go through them word by word, because he knew I had read them and had begun to educate myself. And I was lucky because my personal physician was also my next door neighbor. So he knew my lifestyle and knew that I was going to be, pretty diligent about understanding this, this
Mm-hmm.
condition.
Well, what were some of the special exceptions? We know that vitamin K is
Right.
really important, rather the amounts of vitamin K, because vitamin K is an essential component for clotting.
Right.
So did you have to alter your diet, or did you have to pay special attention to it?
Yes. So before, and this is another interesting sort of predetermining factor, I think, not just the travel, but I ate a lot of leafy green vegetables, those are really the main sources in our normal diet of vitamin K. For example, iceberg lettuce doesn't have much, but romaine does, right? Kale has an enormous amount. Spinach, I love spinach. I ate a lot of spinach before that. So I had to cut back, and I didn't eliminate them from my diet, but I cut way back. And I did control very carefully the intake. So I knew exactly how much I was taking each day. There were some things I totally eliminated from my diet. For example, avocados. And the reason for that is avocados, you can have two avocados that look the same, but yet one will have very little vitamin K and the other can have an enormous amount per unit weight. So the variability was just, it's something that you would just imagine, well, I'm not going to eat those then, right? Because I don't want to inject that kind of variability into my diet. I'm a big fan of, if I can control things through my diet, I'll be better off. So I kind of laugh once in a while and say, I went to meat and potatoes for 6 months.
The opposite direction of what some people end up having to do.
Right, and the other thing that was a little bit interesting to me, and I don't remember how important a factor this was made out to be, but I know I wasn't supposed to get really overheated when I worked out. So don't really stress your body out, and because now you're making your liver work pretty hard, and that's where the clotting factors come from in your bloodstream, right? So you need to be really careful about how you control your the energy expenditure that your body goes through. So and I had my clot occurred in early July. So in Austin, July is the hottest time of year. So rather than, I'm not going to go outside and run at noon, right? Because I'm not just going to get super heated. So that was a pretty substantial change. Another change was because you have to worry about your blood, maybe not being maybe not being able to clot so much anymore.
Right, and warfarin has the effect of thinning blood so that it doesn't clot as easily, but then the concern obviously is that you don't clot enough when you need to clot.
Right, yeah. So another thing I did was I had taken baby aspirin 1 a day at that point, and that's a different way to thin the blood, right? As you get older, they kind of recommend that for your heart. But that's really, I think that's a platelet lubricity issue, whereas warfarin is really about clotting factors in the bloodstream, which is it's a chemistry thing, right? And so I stopped taking aspirin during that time just because it was another variable we wanted to eliminate. So I really changed my diet pretty dramatically. I went out and bought the Coumadin cookbook, which was really great for meat and potato recipes.
Well, that sounds like just the diet and the recipe for some people out there already.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Now, were there any, besides your diet, any special activities that, you were precluded from doing besides even, like you said, exercising in the heat? Was there any major concern about getting injuries or stopping bleeding if it were to occur?
Yes. In fact, when I had the weekly blood test, one thing I noticed right away was that the bleeding did not stop. Just a little pinprick in the finger is what was needed to get the blood test taken. So, you can usually just do this with your fingers for 2-3 minutes and then the blood will stop, right? But it would take 30 minutes or more.
Wow.
Because, we were trying to keep my blood relatively thin. The other lifestyle change for me was I like to drive cars fast at the racetrack, and I couldn't do that anymore because of the concern about blunt force trauma. Any kind of accident, if you have a bad bruise, you could, potentially bleed to death if your blood doesn't clot well. So, that's the kind of thing that, really was a big change for me.
Now, I'm interested too sort of in the more personal side. I mean, this is all very technical, and obviously things about your life had to change, from the event of having the clot itself, and then of course having to go through, like you said, the 10-day heparin treatment and then the 6 months of warfarin.
Right.
Did it have, does this have a psychological impact or an emotional impact on you and your family?
Oh yeah. For me personally, I stopped traveling for about 6 to 8 weeks. And then after that, I remember still the first aircraft I got on. I was fidgeting, and it was Austin to Dallas, literally a 35-minute flight. And then I went Dallas to Milwaukee, so maybe an hour, right? Not very far. I was fidgeting the whole time, just trying to keep my blood flowing. I mean, it really changes your attitude. I mean, for me, it was my first glimpse of mortality, I think, right? So, I mean, that was a big deal. And I think also, just having to go through a dietary change for the first time in my life, and strictly control my diet. My attitude had always been, I'll eat as much as I want, anything I want. I'll just exercise to keep my weight, where I want it. It wasn't like that anymore. Mm-hmm. So that was a big change. And, it was a big change for my family, because now all of a sudden, if they were going to have kale or spinach, right, I wasn't. So it was almost like we had to cook for two different diets. Mm-hmm. Right. So, and just things like that. That was part of it. But I think also there was probably some worry, from the other family members about, is Dad okay, or is my husband okay, right? So.
Right. Well, there's a lot of new information out there about genetic variability in certain genes that affect your metabolism of warfarin.
Right.
We're just curious. Do you know of anything about your genetics with regards to that sensitivity to warfarin yet?
I do not know, and I didn't know there was a genetic component, so that's good. I'm going to go study it, actually.
Yeah, and we'll just ask as a follow-up then, so this is something you would be interested in knowing about yourself then, in case
Absolutely.
you ever needed warfarin in the future.
Absolutely, right. Yeah, and there has been stroke or heart disease in my ancestry, mm-hmm. Recent ancestry, both sides of my family, father and mother. I've always looked at that and said, well, back then people smoked a lot and they didn't have very good diets, and I'm in much better health than my father was at my age and his father. But, it kind of makes me wonder. And I know there has been a history of strokes on my mother's side of the family in particular. And of course, that's one byproduct of blood clots.
Oh, absolutely.
You get around as a stroke. So.
So overall, you're pretty pleased then that a drug like warfarin does exist at all.
Right.
Obviously to assist. But this was a big sort of life-changing event for you.
Right.
If you could, talk to someone that was either just diagnosed with a blood clot and was going to have to go on warfarin over a period of time, or if you were going to have to give advice to a family member or a friend of someone who was going to have to undergo that, do you have any helpful or important advice or opinion that you'd like to share with them, something that you think it's important and they should know about?
Well, when I read about warfarin, I thought, a couple things. It's almost like aspirin. It was discovered quite a while ago, early in the last century, maybe 1930s or 20s. It's amazing that such an effective drug has not really had yet a replacement that works kind of for everybody. You know what I mean? That was interesting to me, because it has been used really for other purposes than treating blood clots before that. At first I thought, I'm not sure I want to put this in my body, but it really wasn't all that bad. The actual ingestion of the drug itself, I really felt nothing, and I felt perfectly normal. So that was good, and I think don't fear, right? On the other hand, for me, I stabilized rapidly, and my clotting factor levels in my blood stayed very constant over time. Maybe that was just discipline. So my advice would be follow a diet. Be really strict about your diet. That doesn't mean deprive yourself, but be consistent with it, mm-hmm. so that your body is being presented with the same chemistry from nutrition. I think that's really important. The other thing is that taking the drug again is not the end of the world. And if you're a typical person that gets a blood clot, you don't take it forever. In my case, it was 6 months and I was off it, and that was 4 years ago. So,
Nice.
I think, but it does change your lifestyle a little bit, or maybe a lot, I guess, depending on the gravity of the situation. But it isn't the end of the world.
Well, we're glad that you had warfarin and that it worked successfully for you, and that you're here to share your story with us.
Oh, thank you very much.